Earth was no longer just a planet of humans, plants, and animals. Something had happened. Cosmic rays and unexplained phenomenon had swept through the world, altering the very fabric of nature itself. Some animals and plants evolved into entirely new organisms, creatures so strange and powerful that humanity had no choice but to acknowledge them. These beings became known as phantom beasts. And they weren't just roaming the wild anymore, they had become part of society. Humans adapted, learning to bond with phantom beasts through an ability called beast mastery. It became a profession and a spectacle. Industries rose around it, competitions, research, and training schools. With the Beastmaster exam approaching, the world was captivated. Screens flashed with phantom beast battles. Debates raged over their origins and evolution, especially those that grew stronger by absorbing human emotions: anger, grief, joy. But not everyone celebrated this change. Li Wenxuan was one of those people. At 18, he didn't have time to dream of becoming a Beastmaster. Not when his younger sister was bedridden, her leg condition worsening by the day. Their parents were gone, and medical treatment wasn't just expensive, it was unreachable. He had been forced to drop out of school to find work. But jobs weren't what they used to be. Why hire a human when phantom beasts could do it better? Restaurants, delivery services, even construction businesses preferred using beasts. They worked harder, never complained, and to top it off, they were adorable, which made customers fawn over them. Take the food stall Wenxuan had just ordered from. The little fur-covered phantom beast handling the orders looked cute, sure. But all that fur shedding into the food? Gross. Still, people loved it. That was just how things worked now. Before Wenxuan could bite into the cheap meat buns he'd bought, a familiar voice called out. Here, eat something better. Old Man Wang stood there, handing him a neatly wrapped meal. It was from a new phantom beast-run restaurant, which meant it was actually clean. Wang had been looking out for him from the start, a quiet father figure in a world that had no room for mercy. Wenxuan took the meal with a quiet thanks. Not everyone was happy to see it. Nearby workers sneered. They didn't like that Wenxuan got the same pay as them despite being smaller and weaker. That kid barely moves anywhere, yet he still gets paid like the rest of us, one muttered. Old Man Wang shot them a glare. He's here for his sister's treatment, not because he's useless like you lot. That shut them up. Truth was, they weren't angry at Wenxuan, they were bitter. Stuck in dead-end jobs because they had no talent. They had failed to become beast masters and were now at the bottom of society. Wenxuan actually had potential, but life had forced him down a different path. Still, he didn't want trouble. Instead of arguing, he simply said, I'll work harder today. It didn't matter to them, but at least it ended the conversation. Their supervisor arrived. A sleeveless man in a tuxedo, stationed to oversee the workers. His eyes were dead, his face unreadable. He didn't look like he had time for anyone's bullshit. Without a word, he raised his hand. His mana flared. The portal to the phantom mind shimmered into existence. He stepped in first. One by one, the workers followed. Inside the phantom mind, the workers split into groups. After the earlier tension, the bitter men got petty. They deliberately paired Wenxuan with Old Man Wang, as if mocking Wang for protecting him. Since the old man wanted to defend the kid so badly, he might as well carry his weight too. Wenxuan clenched his fists, ready to throw hands, but Wang stopped him. Not worth it, he muttered. So they got to work. Wenxuan did his best, but after an hour, his body was giving out. His arms ached, his legs felt like lead, each breath heavy. But no way was he letting them be right. He forced himself to keep going until a piercing scream echoed through the cave. Not a normal scream. A dying scream. Without thinking, Wenxuan and Wang rushed toward the sound and froze. Their supervisor stood calmly, watching as his phantom beast, a massive wolf, tore into the workers. Its fangs were drenched in blood. And he wasn't stopping it. The others hadn't realized yet. They thought he'd lost control of his beast. In their panic, they yelled, cursed, begged him to rein it in. That's when he laughed. A low, amused chuckle. Then he smirked. Relax. My wolf will make sure you all die soon enough. And the wolf understood. It lunged, tearing into more bodies. Panic exploded. Wenxuan froze, mind flashing back to something he'd seen on TV, a woman explaining how some phantom beasts evolved by feeding on emotions. Anger. Despair. Fear. That's what was happening. This nightmare wolf was feeding on their terror. Realizing it, Wenxuan shouted, "Stop panicking. You're making it stronger. One beast against a whole group, they could kill it and its master if they just worked together." Brilliant plan. Except now he was the target. The sleeveless bastard's eyes locked on him. His smirk faded. Then he gave them a choice. 1. Fight the wolf together and all die. 2. Kill each other so the wolf could evolve faster and some might survive. It was a lie. But fear is stronger than logic. Before Wenxuan could call it out, pain tore through his back. A knife. His vision blurred. He staggered. Turned. Old man Wang. His hand trembled around the blade. Why? Wenxuan choked out. The old man didn't hesitate. I have a family to protect. If killing you buys me more time, so be it. The others didn't need any more convincing. They rushed Wenxuan. Stabbed. Tore. Ripped him apart. He was the first to fall. And standing on the sidelines, watching the carnage unfold, was the sleeveless bastard, a satisfied grin stretched across his face. This was better than he could have imagined. The negative energy surging through the air, born from fear, hatred, and desperation as they tore each other apart, was far more potent than anything he could have harvested by killing them himself. And amidst the chaos, with despair soaking the atmosphere, his wolf began to change. It evolved. Satisfied, his task complete, he turned away. By the time the bloodbath ended, only 3 workers remained. Exhausted, broken, and suffocating in guilt, they had survived, but at a cost they could never repay. There was no going back. So, they did the only thing they could, they covered it up. Dragging the bodies one by one to the nearby river, they dumped them into the current and crafted a lie, blaming it all on a mining accident. Meanwhile, Wenxuan still clung to life, but just barely. His limbs were numb, his vision fading, and death's cold fingers were wrapping around him, pulling him under. The world blurred, and memories flashed, his sister's smile, the quiet nights they spent dreaming of a better future, and the promise he'd made to protect her. Who would care for her if he died here? He didn't want to die. If he had just one more chance, one more opportunity for revenge, he would make that sleeveless bastard pay. His hatred surged, and that rage awakened something. Phantom beasts were drawn to strong emotions, and the depth of Wenxuan's fury resonated, reaching into the depths where something ancient stirred. An evil power, hidden beneath the waters, had been watching, observing how phantom beasts were enslaved, used, shackled. It had waited patiently for a vessel, a means to bring ruin to the world that bound its kind. Now it had found one. Darkness wrapped around Wenxuan, consuming him. A whisper slithered into his mind, the power speaking to him. Moments later, he rose from the river's depths. His wounds gone. His body renewed. And in his hand, he held something brimming with power. Fortunately for him, the bastards had already left. As expected, they were too eager to hide the evidence, and in their haste, they'd missed one. So much for being careful. Wenxuan took a deep breath and tossed aside the object he was holding, trying to steady himself. His body felt different. Not just from nearly dying. Something had changed.
But because his wounds were completely gone, his gaze shifted to the small, unconscious strawberry cat lying next to him. Was this thing responsible? That didn't seem right. As far as he knew, this type of monster had no healing abilities. But before he could question it further, his thoughts were interrupted. A system interface popped up right in front of him. His eyes widened. This wasn't just any system. This was an evolution system, something that could bypass the usual requirements of becoming a Beastmaster. And just like that, he had a way in, and his first mission was to sign a contract with the strawberry cat. That was easy enough. And since the little guy was already unconscious, Wenxuan didn't waste time. He gathered all his mana into his hand and reached out, ready to form the contract. Unfortunately for him, the cat had other plans. The moment it woke up, it jumped back in an instant, its fur bristling as it dropped into a fighting stance, ready to throw hands. But Wenxuan wasn't planning to fight, so he quickly tried to talk things out, only to get rocked mid-sentence. The strawberry cat wasn't here for negotiations, and the worst part? It was proud of itself for knocking him down. The little menace stood tall, puffing out its chest like it had just won. So Wenxuan quickly got up to retaliate, but the cat was a true brawler and welcomed him with open arms. Unfortunately, it seemed like the cat's stamina wasn't enough against an apex predator. So it got brutally beaten down, completely outclassed, and in the end it had no choice but to become his pet beast. But it seemed like coming out of the portal had made a huge noise, enough to alert the others, and Wenxuan couldn't have that. Without wasting a second, he hid himself as quickly as he could, pressing against the shadows to avoid detection. A small group of staff arrived at the scene, but judging by their conversation, it was clear they didn't know the full story. They thought there'd been a cave-in or some other accident. Instead of looking for a culprit, they were worried about whether anyone had survived and needed help. Some even expressed genuine sorrow for the lives lost, and that just fueled Wenxuan's anger even more. If it weren't for old man Wang stabbing him first, none of this would have spiraled into a bloodbath. If that old fool had just believed in him, hadn't let fear control him, then most of those workers would still be alive. And for that, he promised that Wang would pay the price. But revenge would have to wait. Right now, there was something more important, and that was his sister. So Wenxuan moved quickly, keeping to the shadows as he made his way back to his apartment. And then he saw it. His home was on fire. Flames devoured the building, thick smoke rising into the sky. The heat was intense, the air thick with panic. With that, instinct took over. Wenxuan didn't stop to think. He rushed straight into the burning building, shoving past the choking smoke and searing heat. He reached their apartment door and immediately started banging on it, heart pounding. He called out to Xian, and a faint sound came from inside. She was still in there, barely conscious. So, without hesitation, he grabbed the door handle, only to hiss in pain as the metal scorched his skin. It was practically melting from the heat, and even attempting to turn it felt like grabbing a chunk of burning coal. But he didn't care. Ignoring the pain, he threw his full weight against the door, slamming into it with brute force, but nothing. He tried again and again, but instead, the handle snapped off. It was completely useless now. With this, desperation clawed at him. He had no time. The fire was spreading fast, the smoke thickening, and the heat becoming unbearable. His sister was in there. He couldn't lose her. His mind screamed for a solution, but his body had already decided. He kicked the door hard, again and again. Each second that passed felt like a lifetime. From inside, Xian's weak voice reached him. She was pleading for him to leave, telling him to save himself because she could feel it too. The flames were closing in. But what kind of brother would he be if he just walked away? His body felt like it was breaking, but he kept kicking, voice raw as he screamed for help. He couldn't lose her, and just when it felt like all hope was slipping away, a familiar presence stirred. His emotions had awakened the strawberry cat. With a sudden burst of energy, the little fur ball got into position and cast fist, bursting the door wide open just in time to save his sister. Wenxuan wasted no time, sprinting inside and grabbing Xian, barely managing to drag her out before the apartment collapsed behind them. A few days later, when Xian told Xian everything, how Wang and the others betrayed him in the dungeon, and how he barely made it out alive, Xian was shaken, but she had to know the truth in case Wang or his men came looking. When Xian couldn't go to the authorities either, if that sleepless coward found out he was alive, Xian would be the first target. Justice wasn't an option, this was personal. He had to get stronger fast. Next time, he wouldn't survive. He'd make sure they didn't. The very next day, he joined a group of Beastmasters heading into the wilderness. With this in mind, as soon as the next day arrived, when Xian joined a group of other Beastmasters heading into the wilderness, his goal was to find another beast, something that could help him gain even more strength. But the moment the others noticed his strawberry cat, the ridicule started. Especially since junior Beastmasters could only contract with 2 beasts at most. To them, it was a joke. But when Xian didn't hear a single word they said, because he was too busy wondering, why were these guys' beasts so damn weak? Some didn't even have exclusive traits, and the ones that did? Only 2 at most, and with a measly 10% effectiveness. Meanwhile, his strawberry cat had 7 rare traits, all above 15%. Before he could think too much about it, a blonde-haired guy came sprinting out of the forest, panting like he'd seen a ghost. He barely got the words out, but when he did, everyone froze. He'd just seen a second-level phantom beast. While Blondie looked ready to pass out from fear, the others cheered. Because if they caught a beast like that, they wouldn't just be strong, they'd be invincible among beginners. With that in mind, the group immediately pressed him for the exact location, which he didn't hesitate to point out. From his description, it was fast, way too fast for a normal beast. That could only mean one thing, a second-level lightning cat. And this was just what they needed. The group took off running in the direction he pointed. But when Xian didn't follow, trusting the wrong crowd could get him killed. So instead of blindly chasing the hype, he decided to do his own thing. He turned to his strawberry cat, ready to command it to start hunting, only to find the little menace sitting there, munching on snacks like it had 0 cares in the world. His eye twitched. Of all the beasts he could have contracted with, he got stuck with this one. When Xian was beyond frustrated, how could he get stronger when his so-called partner was too busy eating sweets to listen? He picked up the little fur ball and shoved it forward, trying to make it move. But instead of cooperating, it smirked and messed around even more, ignoring his commands and strolling off casually, kicking pebbles like it was all a game. When Xian clenched his fists. If he ever found a proper beast that actually listened, he was replacing this smug little menace for sure.
His thoughts were abruptly cut off when something sticky and disgusting slapped him right in the face. Reflexively, he wiped it away, and what he saw made his stomach plummet. A candy spider loomed just above him. Its many eyes were locked onto him, brimming with pure, unrestrained fury, completely out of character for a species known for being peaceful and non-aggressive. Candy spiders didn't attack unprovoked. So why was this one so enraged? Had he wandered into its territory? Or worse, had something pissed it off? His gaze darted around for answers, and then he saw the real problem. His strawberry cat. The little menace stood nearby, throwing up rude cat signs and mocking the spider relentlessly. Judging by the gestures, it had straight up called the spider fat. Understandably, the spider was not having it. And now, it was out for blood. The worst part? Instead of backing off, the strawberry cat doubled down. With zero hesitation, the feral little beast charged the candy spider, ignoring the glaring difference in levels. It was only level 5, while the spider was a solid level 8. Predictably, it got clapped. The spider barely moved, it simply shot out a web, snaring the cat effortlessly like it was catching a fly. Now Wenxuan understood why no sane person chose a strawberry cat as their starter beast. They were unhinged, combative, and had absolutely no sense of self-preservation. Still, he couldn't just let the little idiot get eaten. Without thinking, he snatched up the furball and bolted. But the candy spider was livid, chasing them down with single-minded fury, firing webs and lunging at every chance. And just when Wenxuan thought it couldn't possibly get worse, it did. In a desperate attempt to dodge an attack, he leapt only to realize, mid-air, that he had just jumped off a cliff. And for a moment, it seemed like that was the end. Nope. They didn't die. The candy spider, still furious, wasn't about to let them escape. It crept toward the cliff edge, preparing to descend after them and finish the job. But just as it moved, a blast of water struck it dead on, soaking it to the core. Before it could react, ice rapidly formed, encasing its body. Within seconds, it was frozen solid, mid-attack, its furious expression locked in place. On the cliff stood the one responsible, a blonde guy. But unlike the first blonde dude Wenxuan had met, this one was different. He had a chiseled, powerful chin. Moments later, Wenxuan's eyes fluttered open. He was alive. And the reason? He'd landed directly on top of his strawberry cat. Honestly, the little menace deserved it, but Wenxuan still gave a quick apology before standing and dusting himself off. Surveying the area, the dense trees, rocky terrain, and eerie stillness, it didn't take long to figure out where they'd ended up. The valley of the western mountain forest. Translation? It was going to be a long, brutal trek back. With a sigh, Wenxuan started walking, dragging his pink little menace along with him. Of course, the strawberry cat refused to behave. Instead, it picked fights with every single monster they came across. Wenxuan was sure that when they got back, he was disciplining this cat. But something wasn't right. The deeper they ventured into the forest, the stranger things became. Even usually harmless creatures, like Nini sheep, renowned for their docile nature, attacked them on sight. Something was wrong. Wenxuan checked his system, pulling up data on the fallen Nini sheep, and felt a chill in his gut. Even unconscious, the sheep was stuck in a frenzied state. That was not normal. Something in the valley was triggering it, and they needed to get out, fast. He ordered his cat to move. Naturally, the little beast ignored him, walking in the opposite direction. Assuming it was just being petty, Wenxuan shouted for it to stop fooling around. But the cat didn't listen, forging deeper into the woods. To his surprise, it led him to a decrepit, abandoned house, standing eerily silent in the heart of the valley. Something about it felt wrong. A faint red aura pulsed around it, like the building was alive. Even the strawberry cat, usually an unshakable menace, seemed uneasy. Before Wenxuan could react, an inhuman screech erupted from within, a blood-curdling sound that made his hair stand on end. His instincts screamed at him to run. But of course, his strawberry cat was already heading for the entrance, clearly unfazed. With no other choice, Wenxuan grabbed a stick, because screw entering haunted houses unarmed, and cautiously opened the door. Immediately, a wave of stench slammed into him, a nauseating mix of rot, blood, and something worse. Eyes watering, he stepped inside, gripping his makeshift weapon tight. As his eyes adjusted to the dim light, he saw them. Cages, dozens of them, lined the room. Inside were phantom beasts, injured, weakened, barely hanging on to life. They'd been tortured, experimented on, abused. Illegal activity, no question, but the priority now was clear. Save them first. Ask questions later. Without hesitation, he ordered his strawberry cat to break the cages. And, for once, it complied. As the lock shattered, Wenxuan rushed to the nearest beast, a young Arctic dog. Up close, its condition was far worse than he'd thought. It was on the brink of death. Wenxuan's hands clenched. He had no high-grade healing items, just a low-tier potion. No hesitation, he poured the potion onto the dog, silently praying it would be enough. To his relief, the weak potion worked, his emotions seemed to boost its effect. The dog's breathing steadied, its eyes cleared. But unease crept in. These beasts weren't just prisoners, they'd been experimented on, altered, broken. And the cold precision behind it all felt eerily familiar. It was too similar to what that sleeveless bastard had done in the mines. The Shadow Hunter organization. That could only mean one thing: this was bad. Wenxuan knew he wasn't strong enough to face monsters like that, not yet. But he couldn't walk away either. If he left, the beasts would die here. As he searched for a solution, the Arctic dog, still weak, forced itself to stand and walked forward, urging them to follow. Even in its condition, it was leading them somewhere. Wenxuan followed. The dog led into a basement, and the stench hit him immediately, worse than the house above. Another lab. Another testing ground for phantom beasts. He didn't hesitate to enter, but something felt off. The basement was far larger than the house. It had been built for something big. And he was right. A massive beast lunged at the strawberry cat the moment they stepped inside, jaws wide. Wenxuan yanked the cat out of the way just in time. They were face to face with a monster. A bloodhound, already in its second phase. Wenxuan checked its stats, hoping for a chance. Nope. Level 32. Bloodthirst passive damage taken was converted into health. Even with debuffs, they couldn't outlast it. This was a fight they couldn't win. He was about to retreat when he saw the beast was chained. Relief until the Arctic dog launched itself at the bloodhound. Wenxuan panicked, expecting the worst. But the dog wasn't attacking, it was greeting the bloodhound. It all made sense. This wasn't desperation. The dog had led them here on purpose. The bloodhound wasn't just a companion. It was the pup's mother. Before Wenxuan could react, the dog called out to him. He wasn't about to walk up to a second-phase beast like an idiot. The cat mocked him, calling him a coward and saying to trust the dog. He demanded proof. The dog pointed to an object left by the humans, something important. It was an experiment log. The entries detailed everything. Day 1. 2 Arctic ice dogs acquired a mother and pup for experiments. Days 2 to 9. Starved. No food or water. Day 10. The mother was forced to eat other beasts, expected to evolve. She resisted. Day 15. The pup was beaten in front of her. Rage followed. By day 20, the mother began to evolve. Final step? Make the mother consume her own pup. Wenxuan felt sick. He'd arrived just in time. He turned to the strawberry cat. Break the chains. The cat didn't argue and grabbed a hammer. Wenxuan rushed to the collar, struggling with the metal clasps. They wouldn't budge. Years of hard labor gave him the strength he needed. With effort, he tore the restraint away. Both he and the cat were exhausted. But it wasn't over. One chain left. As he reached for it, the bloodhound lunged. His heart stopped. But it didn't attack, it silenced them. Then he heard it. Footsteps. Voices. People were coming. Hide, Wenxuan ordered. The bloodhound rolled its chains, pretending it was still bound. Just in time. A body tumbled down the stairs with a sickening thud. Wenxuan recognized him, the tamer from the forest entrance. How had he ended up here? A second figure followed, thick with menace. Blondie. The same man who had screamed about a second-phase beast. It was all staged to lure tamers away from his lab. But one had wandered too far. Now he would learn the truth. Blondie stared at the tamer and explained everything. Yes, it was his doing. Yes, he had spread blood rose pollen to drive creatures into madness. Yes, he had forced them to slaughter each other. But now that the tamer knew, he couldn't be allowed to leave. The tamer begged, said the police would investigate. Blondie didn't care. He ended him without hesitation. The Blondie knew it was all nonsense. In the secret region, tamers vanished constantly. One more body, one more disappearance? No one would care. And his hellhound hadn't eaten yet. Why not throw a human into the mix? See how she liked the taste. To him, it was just a fun little experiment. That was all Wenxuan needed to hear. His gut turned cold. This man wasn't just sadistic, he was utterly unhinged. The kind of unpredictable madman who could decide to kill on a whim. Staying here any longer wasn't bravery, it was suicide. He needed to get out. Now. There'd be time to deal with this lunatic later. Wenxuan turned to the hellhound, speaking low and fast, laying out a desperate plan. He would flee with her pup, come back with backup. But first, he needed her to create an opening. She didn't hesitate. A low, feral growl rippled from her throat, filling the room with tension. It worked. The blondie's head snapped toward her, his expression twisting into a scowl. He frowned, assuming she was angry because of the Arctic dog among the captives, her own kind. He didn't notice the missing collar. Too arrogant. Too entertained. Smirking, he stepped closer, mocking her snarling face, taunting her for being so emotional. While he basked in his own cruelty, Wenxuan edged toward the stairs, every movement slow, deliberate. Just a few more steps. A barrier shimmered into existence, blocking his path. He barely managed to stop before crashing into it, heart pounding against his ribs. What? Then he saw it. Floating above, cloaked in a chilling aura, an ice demonic flower. Its petals pulsed with malevolent energy. Their cover was blown. Before Wenxuan could react, the flower flicked its petals. A wave of freezing mist exploded toward him. He had no time to dodge. Ice engulfed him. In a heartbeat, Wenxuan and the strawberry cat were frozen where they stood, trapped in an unyielding prison of frost. Panic surged through him. He couldn't move. The blondie turned, eyes gleaming. No hesitation. No gloating. Just action. He raised his blade, intent on ending it right there. Wenxuan's heart stuttered. But before the strike could land, the hellhound moved. A blur of blackened fire, she slammed into the blondie with brutal force, intercepting his attack. For a breathless moment, the man froze. Staring. His gaze fell to her neck, the collar. Open. Gone. Realization hit him like a blow. You fool, he spat. You think she's yours now? But his voice wavered. Because the hellhound wasn't attacking out of confusion or instinct. Her eyes, burning, focused, were locked only on him. Something shifted in his face. Panic. Stop her, he shouted at the ice demon. The creature stirred. But too late. The hellhound lunged. With terrifying speed, she tore through the air and devoured the ice demon whole. Silence followed. The blondie made a strangled sound, then exploded into motion, racing to the cages. He threw them open. Dozens of battered beasts stumbled out, confused, broken. He didn't care. He just needed time. But when the beasts saw the hellhound, they froze. Trembled. They knew they couldn't win. Still, they charged. Not out of courage. But out of fear. Fear of the man behind them. Better to die than be left with him. It didn't matter. The hellhound tore through them like paper. Blood and screams everywhere. And then, the blondie ran. Wenxuan and the strawberry cat were already moving. With the ice demon dead, the ice trapping them shattered. They pursued. Caught up in seconds. Slamming the blondie to the dirt, pinning him. But it was a trap. Before Wenxuan could bind him, the man twisted free, grinning, and hit a switch. Metal bars erupted from the ground, forming a cage around Wenxuan. The blondie laughed, eyes wild. You're the only one dying here. From above, thick, red-tinged smoke spilled into the air. Wenxuan's blood turned to ice. Phantom beasts without masters went berserk when exposed to it. The hellhound was already changing. Her eyes burned with madness, her snarl twisted with bloodlust. Wenxuan lunged for the blondie. Turn it off. But the man wasn't trapped. He slipped away, laughing. Now, the hellhound was out of control. She tore through the last of the beasts and turned. Eyes locked on Wenxuan as hunter. He was prey. He ran holding both strawberry cat and Arctic dog. But ice shackles snapped around his legs. The ice demon, still alive. Heart pounding, he braced for the end. The hellhound leapt. Claws flashing. Then a sound. A soft, plaintive whimper. The pup. She froze. Her claws shifted not toward Wenxuan, but to the shackles, shattering them in a spray of frost. Even in this frenzy, she recognized her child. The strawberry cat spotted an opening and didn't hesitate. With a sudden burst of speed, it sprang forward. As it closed in on the device, its paws glowed with a radiant energy, the meow meow punch, empowered by a blinding beam of light. In one swift, powerful strike, the destruction surged on. The ground shook as a shockwave spread, splitting the foundation. The structure groaned, then collapsed, stone walls crumbling, metal beams snapping, and flames tearing through broken wood. The house crashed down in a violent, fiery ruin. Beneath the rubble, the blondie's hiding place disappeared, buried under stone, metal, and fire. His screams rose with the dust. Begging. Pleading. He threw his phantom beast balls at Wenxuan, swearing he'd change. Wenxuan stared at him, expressionless. This man had shown no mercy. Not to beasts. Not to people. Why should he receive any? The blondie's voice trembled, cracking under pressure. Go ahead and kill me, but the police will come. They'll investigate everything after I'm gone. Wenxuan smiled coldly. In a place like this? Tamers die all the time. Behind him, Bloodhound stood silently, his presence like a shadow of death. The blondie's eyes widened in fear, but it was too late. Wenxuan turned his back, leaving without another word as Bloodhound stepped forward. Moments later, the job was done. The blondie was left in silence. Bloodhound turned to Wenxuan. She made a silent gesture, pleading for Wenxuan to take care of her child, the young Arctic dog, as she sensed her own death approaching. Wenxuan checked the Bloodhound wound stats, but the screen showed no treatment available. Without hesitation, he accepted the Arctic dog. As the Bloodhound's eyes slowly closed, Wenxuan walked away, carrying her child in his arms. By morning, as he stepped out of the forest through the portal, Wenxuan pondered how to form a contract with the two phantom beasts. He glanced at the stats of the Arctic dog. Evolution required 3 ice crystals, 10 first grass, and a single evolution crystal. But as for the method to forge a bond, there wasn't a clue. His strawberry cat, on the other hand, needed 99 of each crystal to evolve. Absurd. He gently placed the Arctic dog onto a smooth, flat rock, its icy fur shimmering faintly in the dawnlight. That's when he heard the whispers. Multiple deaths, in the mines. And deep in his gut, Wenxuan knew his must be that sleeveless bastard. He turned to them, voice steady. What happened in the mines? One stepped forward, calm but grim. It's not just miners now. Beast tamers went in too, none returned. Wenxuan's eyes narrowed. A dungeon taking beast tamers? That wasn't just dangerous, it was wrong. Deep within the mine, chaos reigned. Where once there was the steady clang of pickaxes, now only screams echoed, brief, desperate, then silenced. A massive, 3-eyed night wolf stalked the tunnels, its blood-stained claws carving through stone and flesh alike. With each kill, its power swelled, the air thick with its dark, pulsing aura. At the center of the slaughter stood the sleeveless bastard, now dressed sharply in black. Despite the suit, his eyes still gleamed with cruelty. Beside him, Old Man Wang watched the carnage with sick delight. You've done well, the suited man said smoothly. 10 sacrifices tonight. Your beast is coming along. Wang bowed, grinning. An honor to serve. From his coat, the man taken out a sleek capture ball. A gift, the man said. The organization approves. Wang's breath caught. At last, true power, offered freely. He dropped to his knees. I won't fail you. Tomorrow, I'll bring more. The man smirked. See that you do. The next day, true to his word, Old Wang stood at the mine's entrance, overseeing a fresh batch of recruits. His sharp eyes swept over them, some looked eager, others nervous, but none had any idea of the horror that waited below. As he scanned the crowd, one figure caught his attention. They stood slightly apart, not in the standard mining gear, a hood drawn low over their face. Something about them felt wrong. Wang's curiosity piqued. He moved closer, eyes narrowing. Under the hood, Wenxuan said nothing, his face hidden in shadow, but beneath the silence, his expression was ice-cold, laced with contempt. Old Wang, as always, played his part flawlessly. With a warm smile and polished ease, he greeted Wenxuan like an old friend, his voice soaked in practiced kindness. To any outsider, he was the perfect overseer, thoughtful, professional, a man devoted to his workers. But Wenxuan wasn't fooled. Every word, every casual gesture only deepened the disgust roiling in his gut. It was all an act, a carefully crafted mask to hide the monster beneath. Before he could act on that rage, someone stepped between them. A woman. Younger than the others, her uniform hung slightly loose, sleeves too long for her frame. Her stance was firm, but off uncertain, unfamiliar, not the posture of a seasoned miner. She met his glare, eyes sharp with defiance. "What's your problem?" she snapped. Wenxuan's gaze swept over her clenched fists, controlling himself. "Kids aren't allowed in the mines," he said. Her expression flickered. "I'm not a kid," she shot back, voice tight. That was all he needed. She was new, and definitely not just a miner. Before he could press her, Wang chuckled lightly, stepping in to smooth things over. He waved Wenxuan's comment away with a friendly smile, diffusing the moment like it was all a harmless misunderstanding. The tension faded, the conversation moved on, and the group headed for the mine's entrance. But Wenxuan kept his eyes on her. Up front, Wang raised a hand, signaling the group to stop. With a flick of his wrist, a portal shimmered into existence, its unstable energy pulsing in the dim light. One by one, the workers stepped through, vanishing into the mine's depths. Wenxuan hesitated. His fingers twitched, a familiar dread clawing at his spine. The cold air, the eerie glow of the portal. A warning in his gut. He narrowed his eyes at Wang, who smiled, unbothered. This wasn't a mining trip. Something was deeply wrong. And if Wenxuan was right, if Wang truly stood behind it all, then today, someone wasn't coming back. Old Wang walked ahead, expression calm as he addressed the workers. "As always, remember why we're here," he said, voice carrying through the cavern. "Cloud minerals are vital for beast evolution. The cave can be unpredictable. Safety comes first. If anything goes wrong, call for help." His words were smooth, practiced. The workers nodded, then began to pair up, instinctively finding familiar partners. Shanli stood alone. Wenxuan noticed but said nothing until he turned toward her. "Want to team up?" She blinked, surprised. Then her expression tightened. "I'm fine on my own." Wenxuan shrugged and started to move away. Then she grabbed his sleeve. "Sorry. I do need a team and I'm physically strong." "I can handle myself," she added quickly. "That's not what I'm concerned about," he said. She frowned. "Then what?" He lowered his voice. "Stay away from old Wang." She froze. "Why?" Wenxuan didn't answer. It was a warning. Whether she listened or not was her choice. Shanli's arms shook as she swung her pickaxe. Mining was harder than she thought. Wenxuan watched, seeing someone who refused to give up, just like he once did. Suddenly, a scream echoed through the cave. Everyone froze. Wenxuan and Shanli ran toward the sound, ready for danger, but instead, they found workers crowding around a huge, glowing crystal. No danger. Just excitement. A brown-haired worker stood proudly, claiming the biggest share. The others cheered him on. Wang watched from the shadows, not smiling. He used to be honest. Now, all he saw was a chance. No beast tamer around. No one to stop him. If he killed everyone, the crystal would be his, and with it, enough power to evolve his beast and break free from control. The brown-haired worker began dividing the shares. Wang pretended to agree. Then he attacked. Blood hit the crystal. The worker fell. Wang turned to the others, ready to kill again. Wenxuan didn't move. He expected this. Before he could act, Li stepped forward, gun aimed at Wang. She looked calm and ready. Wang was shocked. He'd been careful, just 2 deaths per trip, always framed as accidents. No proof, no suspicion. So how the hell did the police come? But it didn't matter now. He raised his hands in surrender. Li didn't trust him. She kept her gun on him, told the others to help the wounded. That's when Wenxuan caught the slightest movement in Wang's arm, and his instincts kicked in. Without missing a beat, he warned Li to move, just in time for her to dodge an attack bursting up from the ground. Too bad for her, she can't dodge though. The wound was small, but it came from a shadow scorpion. That meant venom and fast. Almost instantly, her body locked up. She realized she was in serious trouble, and Wang knew it too. He laughed as he strutted over and swiped the gun from her hands. But Li had guts. Even knowing she was about to get wrecked, she still screamed for the others to run. Wang just said one word and froze them in place. He had a gun now. They all knew there was no outrunning that. And just like that, he was power-tripping hard, thinking he was untouchable, copying that sleeveless bastard's whole act, going on about how he'd spare them if they killed the woman for him. Li wasn't having it. She called his bluff, pointing out that the gun only had 3 bullets left. If they ran for it, they had a chance. Wang didn't care. He really believed they'd do exactly what he had done back then because, in his mind, survival was human nature. But Wenxuan wasn't about to let history repeat itself. He shut Wang up with his fist, sending him flying a few feet back. Enough was enough. He let Wang know he wasn't worth a damn, couldn't even kill a man properly. That's when Wenxuan revealed his identity. Wang was surprised, but not shocked. He tried to burn Wenxuan's sister alive, only to learn she'd survived and was in good hands. He gave Wenxuan credit for being tough, but it didn't change the situation. They were still trapped with a man holding a gun and a beast. Wang made his offer, kill Wenxuan and the officer, and walk free. He wanted accomplices. If they were all guilty, he had no reason to betray them. And for a moment, it looked like his plan might actually work. The others picked up their gear, turning it into makeshift weapons. Just like Wang wanted. But to Wenxuan's surprise, they weren't as cowardly as Wang. They were real men, and real men stood for something. They chose to stop Wang while Wenxuan and Li escaped. It shocked Wenxuan. No one was more shocked than Wang, though. In that moment, he realized something that enraged him. He wasn't a survivor making the logical choice. He was just a coward, and he couldn't stand it. So he did what cowards do, started blasting. But before he could even pull the trigger, an ice beam struck him from behind. Wenxuan and his Arctic wolf had stepped in. It was revenge ice cold. With a Beastmaster on their side, the others finally believed they had a chance. They weren't just fighting to survive anymore. They were fighting to win. Wang thought a tiny beast couldn't stand against his massive one. Wang's venomous centipedes attacked first, using smoke venom deadly enough to kill everyone. But Wenxuan was ready. Arctic Dog blocked it with an avalanche, neutralizing the attack and striking back. The scorpion was agile, dodging by a hair and burrowing underground for a sneak attack. Wang got cocky, telling Wenxuan to kneel and beg. Wenxuan wasn't having it. He fired back that even if you begged, he wouldn't let him off. Wang lost it, ordered his beast to attack. Strawberry Cat was on it. One kick, and that sly bastard was down. Wang was stunned. How did Wenxuan have 2 beasts? Too bad for Wang, Wenxuan wasn't in the mood to explain. He grabbed the pickaxe, ready to end it. Li stepped in. If Wenxuan killed Wang, he'd end up in jail. She didn't want him to start down a road he couldn't return from. She'd make sure Wang got justice. Surprisingly, Wenxuan agreed. Later, Wang was cuffed. The others celebrated. They were safe, but it wasn't over. They had to go with Chen for paperwork. That included Wenxuan. Before they could leave, the cave started shaking. They had to run. Chen was still poisoned, not in top shape. A massive rock dropped toward her. She couldn't dodge, but Wenxuan yanked her out. In the chaos, he realized Wan was gone. He wasn't letting him escape. He sent his pets to help Chen and went after Wang. A huge rock sealed the path behind him, cutting him off. He found Wang stuck with him. Wang talked smack, acting like they were in it together. Wenxuan shut him up, gun drawn. He demanded to know why Wang sacrificed workers. Wang spilled it. He was forced by the same guy who attacked them. If he didn't obey, the guy would expose his past murder. Now trapped, Wang suggested they team up. Wenxuan refused. He shot a chunk of rock from the ceiling, crushing Wang. Just like the workers Wang sacrificed, killed by a collapse. The irony wasn't lost on him. It was clean. Cops wouldn't figure it out. As he turned, a wicked aura surged from Wang's crushed body, seeping into the cave. Outside, the others were digging. The aura slithered into Strawberry Cat, it collapsed. They thought it fainted from exhaustion. They promised to get Wenxuan out. They did. He woke up in a hospital bed, his pets safe and sound at his feet. Peace didn't last. Someone stepped in. Not a doctor. By Sure, VP of the Beast Tamer Association. She was bad, not gonna lie. Wenxuan was shocked. Why was someone like her here? She had news. He didn't have a tamer's license. Wenxuan sat in stunned silence as Bai Sure, vice president of the Beast Tamer Association, laid it all out. His phantom beasts, his only real protection, were going to be confiscated. Unless he passed the tamer's exam. Pass, he keeps them. Fail, he loses them. And if he lost them? He'd lose his ability to protect himself, to survive in a world that already wanted him dead more than once. Bai Sure clearly saw the wariness in his eyes, so she softened her tone, just slightly. They weren't monsters, she claimed. They'd give him a chance to take the exam. Wenxuan cut in sharply, and what if I don't pass? Bai Sure didn't flinch. Then you take it again. And again. Until you do. That should have eased his nerves. But something still felt off. Why was someone of her status here personally? Why not send some lower-ranked grunt? He voiced the question directly, eyes narrowing. Why am I being given this chance? Bai Sure's lips curled into something that wasn't quite a smile. Turns out, she wasn't just here for protocol. During the collapse, the workers saw his phantom beasts, without a contract, digging through the rubble, desperately trying to save him. And that wasn't normal. Phantom beasts were hostile to humans by nature. The only thing that changed that was a contract, a deal where both sides got something out of it. No contract meant no reason to risk their lives for him. She wanted to know how. Wenxuan understood. He didn't have the right or the option to refuse. He said it himself. She didn't deny it. Didn't have to. As she turned to leave, Wenxuan asked one last question. What about the guys in the mine? She paused. Didn't answer. Only said, you'll find out soon. Might get a little noisy. And damn, she wasn't wrong. Not even a second later, the door exploded open and Bit-Size barreled in, loud enough to wake the dead. Wenxuan appreciated the concern, but if she didn't stop yelling, he was seriously tempted to fake passing out just to get some damn peace. Some recovery. And a little quiet. But no chance of that now.